Doesn't that look good? Oh, yummy, yummy, yummy. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Look at that. Hello, my friends. This is Sylvie Curry, Lady of Q, and I'm back in my kitchen. Today is July the 10th, 2020. And as you all know, because of the splurge, we're still on lockdown. We still go out a little bit more than we did back a couple of months, but I'm not going to harp on that. My hubby did go out, and he calls me from the store. He's in Costco, and he says, guess what I found? They've got it back in stock. And he went on to describe what it was, and it was like, oh, okay, bring one home. And so he brought it home. Let me show you what he brought me. He comes back with this 19-pound prime brisket. And this one was at $3.49 a pound. And Costco's had them higher than that before over the last few weeks. So the price was good. So this total price on this 19-pounder is $66.34. It's pretty well marbled. So I think I'm going to have fun with this. Hey, let's smoke a brisket. Okay, we've got this bad boy, and it's got, as I mentioned before, some imperfections, gouges and stuff by the butcher, but we'll get around that. This is not going to be a competition brisket. This is just at home, hubby wanted brisket. So here we go. I've got my knives ready, and the first thing I do is I try to get off the fat that's on the top. And I try to start with that first, mainly because the brisket is still cold, and it's easier to get off when it's cold. The longer I have the brisket out doing the trimming, the harder that top fat and silver skin is to remove. There's a lot of fat on this brisket, and I'm gnawing away at it. Right now, this is the point, so I'm going to take off most of that fat. And as I mentioned, I'm not doing this for competition, so it won't be as fatless as I would have a competition brisket where I was going to make burn ends. I've already cut out some very thick chunks of fat from the back. It's just one of them. I've got a whole bag of it over here. I'm going to weigh out how much I cut away so that I'll know how much actual meat I am cooking. I'm going to start working here on the other side, taking off lots of fat, thick fat, hard fat. I wound up cutting more off than I anticipated because there was a lot of, and there's still a little bit more there, a lot of hard meat and fat. And I've still got a little bit more to get out so that I can get it to lay a little flatter while I'm cooking it. I've trimmed as much as I'm going to trim off of this brisket. It's not a competition brisket, so I didn't have to do as significant a trim so that the appearance would be better. There are a lot of very thin areas where, had it been competition, I would have cut a lot of that off. I would have cut where this gash is, I would have evened that out and cut even more here. Where this gash is, I would have cut further down and evened that out. On the point, I would have did a better job of cutting off a lot of this fat, and this section, see it has a seam there, I would have cut all the way across and gotten rid of this section so that that point would be more even. And this section here I would have cut off because it's separated by another fat section. Here I just want to show you all the fat and areas that were not good meat that I cut off. I'm going to weigh it. 7 pounds, 5.5 ounces. So the 19-pound brisket, I've only really got 12 pounds of brisket. In competition, when I prep my brisket, I typically use a lot of different products from Simply Marvelous and Big Papa Smokers. For my injection, I typically use what's called cattle prod. And this is a combination of salt, onion, garlic, some rendered beef fat, and some other ingredients. And that's just to enhance the flavor, the beefy flavor of the brisket. Not mandatory to use for a home cook, but in competition, this is what I'll do. I've got, what is it, 1/4 of a cup of the cattle prod already weighed out, and I pour that in my beef broth, mix it up, and I give it a chance to dissolve. Sometimes it takes a while to dissolve, and what I'll also do is I'll go through and I'll filter it out just to make sure there's not any big pieces that did not dissolve in the beef broth. When I get ready to season my brisket, I use Simply Marvelous seasonings in addition to one of Big Papa Smoker's Cash Cow. I'll use Simply Marvelous Pepper Cow and also Seasonal. And I like to combine the Seasonal and the Pepper Cow in a shaker, and that way it's sort of like a 1-to-1 ratio of one to the other one. And then the Cash Cow, I'll do that separately because that'll be the first seasoning that I put on my brisket, and then follow up with the combination of the Pepper Cow and the Seasonal. For injecting, I have this injector, and I'll fill it up with product and then inject, 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 inject. And it has a slender needle and only one spout. So when I do my pork, the needle I have has a spout at the bottom and one that's sort of like maybe about a 1/2 inch up. I mixed the cattle prod in the beef broth and I filtered it. Now I'm getting ready to inject the brisket. Now it may or may not take all of this injection. It just depends on how thirsty the meat is, and that varies cow to cow. So pull it up in the injector. And when I inject, I do a process where I inject and pull back, inject and pull back, inject and pull back. So similar to inject, pull back, inject, and as I'm injecting, I'm pulling back. And I do that for the whole brisket, and I try to go, I'm going at an angle, and each of the injections are probably about maybe 1 inch apart. I do inject my point. A lot of people don't, and that's just me. I do that, and I do very well on brisket. And once again, it's an inject and pull back. In the point, I wind up going cross grain when I do the injection, whereas when I do the flat, I go with the grain. Okay, now it's time to season, and I'll start with the Cash Cow, and I put a light coating on it, not a real heavy coating. It's powerful stuff. It's got salt in it, so you don't want to over salt it, because I do have salt in the Pepper Cow and in the Seasonal. And I also try to get the sides. Sometimes you have to shake the shaker just to loosen things up there. There's a lot of big particles of seasoning in that mixture. Then I'll go on with a coating of the Seasonal with the Pepper Cow. And I like to use this because it's got the big hole, so it's not as hard for the seasoning to come out as it is with some of the other bottles. And that's enough for that side. This is the back. Then I flip it over. That big old gap there. And I'll take my bottle. Hands are dirty, so I don't want to get the bottle as dirty. And I'll make sure that I get the point done. And then the flat. And I tried to do a pretty generous coating on this side. This is going to go in the refrigerator overnight. And in the morning, I'll set up the smoker and we'll cook this baby. I'm getting ready to put the brisket on the smoker. I took it out of the refrigerator about 45 minutes ago. So it's still cold, but it is warming up. It's been in there overnight. Closer view. Okay, we're going to try to get this big boy or girl on the smoker. And I think we're good. I've got a temperature probe in the point and another one in the flat. Got a water pan inside there. We're good to go. I'm getting ready to mix the ingredients I'm going to be using for when I wrap this brisket. I've got some beef broth, and this is actually beef base that I've added a little less than a teaspoon of the beef base to about 3/4 cup of water. And for this cook, I'm going to be using the Stubbs dry soy, garlic, and red pepper marinade. Ordinarily, I use the beef marinade that comes in the bottle, but this actually does okay. I don't follow the directions on the back because they don't fit. They say to add the package to 1/4 cup of oil with water and apple cider vinegar. And I don't do it that way. And that this is enough to do 2 pounds of beef in a marinade. I'm doing a brisket, and I'm only using this as the wrap solution with the beef broth, and that's just to give a little bit more flavor in addition to some moisture in the wrap. So what I'm going to do is take the package and just going to add it to the beef broth. Mix it up, and we'll let that sit until I'm ready to wrap. This is about 3 hours in, and I'm getting ready to wrap. Temperatures vary. In the flat, it's about 150-ish, and the point's about upper 150s. Color's good, so we're gonna wrap. Okay, time to pull my brisket off and take it inside to get wrapped. And that's where to grab it. Got this brisket ready to wrap. And I do a lot of the determination of when to wrap based upon the color and how much of the Maillard reaction has occurred. So what I like to do, that way, one pocket. Take this Brisket and fold these sides first. The other side. And I've got a double on the foil just in case I spring a leak. And try to get as tight as possible. And I've got my stubs mixed with some beef broth. And I go into the open side of the foil and just pour all that in there. I'm going to take the foil and tighten it up all around that brisket. See what I'm doing? And then we're just going to take this back outside and put it back on the smoker. Join me out there. Okay, we're back to the smoker. I wrapped it, double foil. And I'm going to get ready to put the probes back in. I'm going to put my one probe into my point. That's going to go on this side. And the other probe back into my flat. And I'll move this brisket back in. Put it in the right place. And we're good to go for another couple of hours until we can get this brisket tender, which should be around 209, 2010, somewhere in there. See you then. I just took the brisket off and it was probe ready, which means that when I push the probe in, I'm not even looking at the temperature, I'm just looking at the ease that it's going into the meat. And the term that you'll hear people say, it feels like butter. Meaning when you go in, it's very smooth and easy to get into the meat. So that indicates doneness. The temperature was approximately 208, and I think that's a good temp to pull off a prime brisket that's cooked. The average temperature in the WSM was 250, but I had it set for 85. Anyway, once out, rule of thumb is to open it up and let it vent. And we're going to let it vent primarily because we don't want to overcook it. And if it stays closed up, then the tendency is that it will continue to cook. Now, keeping in mind that if you suspected that this was undercooked and you needed to get it off for whatever reasons, that if you kept it closed up, it might help you a little bit getting better tenderness. But in general, this one's been cooked to where I think it's done and ready, so I'm venting it so that the temperature inside will decrease. I'm not going to open it up now for about 10-15 minutes, give it a chance to relax, and we'll be back to it. This brisket has been venting for about 15 minutes. I still am not going to cut into it because I'm going to let it rest for at least an hour or so. I'm going to put it in the warmer. Looking good. Okay, my friends, I'm back again. Brisket has been resting for about an hour. for about an hour. So now I'm going to take it out. First thing I'm going to do is separate the flat from the point. This is the point, and ordinarily it's used to make burn ends. I didn't make burn ends this time, but I can still add some of my seasonings to it to finish that process, which I'll probably do a little bit later. But I'm going to put that off the tin, and we'll come back to our brisket, and we'll see what we got. In competition, we will be doing our first cut somewhere around here. So I'm going to do that. Wow. Doesn't that look good? Oh, yummy, yummy, yummy. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Look at that. Let me turn it around so I can get these cuts right. And I left a lot of the fat on it, so let me cut that off. Now we're going to go on this edge. And ordinarily, like I said, we turn in from this section, but sometimes this part here is actually very good also. So let's do some slices there. Wow. Just another slice here. And you can tell how that knife goes through there, that it's mighty, mighty good. Now, making the burn ends, I take the point and I take the best section of the point, and that would be the areas where it wasn't as fibrousy, and we'll cut it into cubes. Pieces of burn ends that are nice and juicy. Making the burn ends, the only thing that's different between now and when I actually make them is that I do put the barbecue sauce on it. And that's what brings out the flavor. I don't put barbecue sauce on the flat. This would only be on the point, or the fatty portion of the brisket. And there are my burn ends, which do still need more cooking. I made me a brisket sandwich. Here it is, on sourdough. And I'm gonna bite into this baby. Very good. And I did not even have to add any more seasoning to it. It's very good just as it is. I put a little bit of the au jus on it, and that's about it. Texture of that is point on. I hadn't had very good results with prime briskets over the past year, but that one comes in as being very good. Now remember, at the beginning of this video, I mentioned that I didn't like the way the brisket looked because it had all those gashes and gouges in it, and it just wasn't butchered and manicured the way that I like my briskets to be. However, cooking it up, hey, texture's at point on. Let me take another bite.